Okay, privacy. We don't have many lectures left. There's today. I do want to cover everything I have in this slide deck, so if we don't get to it all today, it may spill a little bit over onto Friday. Friday and Tuesday, we're going to be going over 3 case studies. The Verizon Super Cookies, Lenovo Superfish, and Cambridge Analytica. I've not done Cambridge Analytica before, so it's a new slide deck. Last year, so when you pull up the last year's final exam, I told the students that we were going to focus 2 of the questions on those first 2. I have not had this conversation with the TAs yet this year, because this year we promised a chunk of the exams would be off of the coursework, and I don't want to promise also this, because that's like half the exam. So we're kind of working on it, but there's a good odds that one of these will show up. I have some slides for these, but these are meant as revision lectures. In that we've picked several cases that touch on almost every aspect of this class in order to properly understand them. So I expect to do some on the slides and some on the board and have a lot more back and forth trying to understand how these attacks function. Note, due to this university's tendency to declare other days Mondays than the actual day, our last lecture is on a Tuesday, not a Monday. Same times. Basically, we pretend Tuesday is Monday.
What happens to the class I have on Tuesday?
It goes away, I think.
So
well, this is making up for... So most of our holidays destroy Mondays or Fridays. So what we've basically done is moved... Our class got canceled a couple times because of a holiday. So now classes that happen on Tuesdays are being canceled that week. And a Monday class is being moved in so that we have equal number of classes for all classes.
So we're just skipping Tuesday and be Monday, Wednesday next week, technically by the university schedule.
Yes, it's just because the Monday is a holiday next week. Monday is a holiday.
What day is it?
I don't remember. I'm not actually natively Canadian. I think it's civic holiday or something. It's one of those weird ones that it just seems to exist for no particularly good reason, other than the fact we need a certain number of holidays in the calendar. If there's any Canadians who want to correct me, you're very welcome to.
They have them for a bunch of different provinces, but say nothing for Ontario. So they're all different days.
I will double check for Friday, but I'm pretty certain of this. I looked up all of the stuff at the beginning of class, and it's been sitting there on our schedule the whole time. But Tuesday, we're showing up on Tuesday and not Monday. I will not be here Monday. Theoretically, no one will be here Monday. All right, we're going to start out off of that video with just a think. We're not doing the pairing or the sharing. We'll do that later. We just watched a whole video about a potentially privacy uncomfortable situation. We're just going to think for 1 minute about a software-mediated interaction that you've recently had and some aspect of the software caused the situation to become awkward or violated the privacy. And it can just be awkward. Awkward is fine. What's going to happen is I'm going to have you think about this, and then we're going to start defining privacy from multiple angles. And then once we're finished with that, we'll do a kind of the share pair part of this. You can change your situation between the 2 of them. But just 1 minute, think to yourself, something awkward that happened to you recently involving software. All right. Just keep that in mind as you progress through the next several things. So, definition of privacy. So this is the more formal definition. There are so many definitions of privacy that we could do an entire class on nothing but definitions. This is the one I am running with. Yes, if you've done another class, you probably learned a different one. This is actually straight out of the Cambridge Dictionary. So the right to privacy is defined in 2 complementary concepts. The first one is someone's right to keep their personal matters and relationships secret. So this is the one that's closest to confidentiality. The right to control the disclosure of personal data, and the right not to disclose data. So this is not, control. This is the one you're used to. The other one that you're also used to, but you didn't really think about up till now, is the right to be alone, to control access to yourself, and the right to have space, physical, digital, just space to be yourself. And that is also the right to privacy. I would argue that second one is the one that gentleman in the video was defending the most. The right to have a space to do what he wants. All right, so controlling personal information. We do this a lot. Most of you have backpacks. You may have objects inside your backpack you don't want to necessarily advertise for many totally irrelevant small reasons. We can control access just by putting something in a bag. We control access by whispering to someone else. There's a lot of different ways we control the visibility of information. Maybe if you're sending a secret note across the room, which I realize is not a thing anymore, you fold it first. You make it into something that kind of rips if you try to open it. There's also controlling access to self. Curtains are the most common example of this. So the curtains are closed. The other one is, how many people do you see wandering around with headphones? Not just headphones, like big headphones. I remember being in a New York subway once, and there was a large gentleman who deeply believed in God and damnation, screaming the entire length of the subway. And I watched a guy with massive headphones just step dead in front of the guy and just kept bopping out. Privacy. Controlling access to yourself. Peace. When we talk about privacy links in this class, we're always talking about this dual concept. It's not just about confidentiality. Confidentiality, maybe I can throw some crypto at that. Access to myself is more complicated. Access to myself is partially why we start worrying about ads. It's not just that they're stealing our data. They bother us. They just disrupt your peace. So you're always kind of thinking about both of these. If we go back to kind of how we think about security, I've highlighted the word authorized all over the place. One of the things I've slowly realized is security is very well defined, but no one ever tells you how to decide who's authorized. Personally, I think the security community has just forked off this thing they've decided to call privacy and made that someone else's problem. Security is like, give me a list of who's allowed to have access, and I will do all this technical stuff we've learned the whole length of the class to ensure that only those people have access. How do you decide who should have access? Well, in a corporate world, maybe we have this, but in an interpersonal world, this gets very complicated. So we call it privacy, and we make it a different field. When we learned about access control, I focused on classic access control. So classic access control is subject-object action. Sometimes it's also what's called conditions, so you can add different conditions. So for example, maybe you can have access, but only if they're logged into a specific computer. Standard if statement stuff. All right, so those top four are classic security. The last one, which is also considered a part of access control, is obligations. Obligations are future tense. So the first four can be proved at the time of access. Is it past noon? Does this particular person have an element in that access control table? Yes or no? These are all things I can prove right now at the time of access. Obligations are something that accessor is promising will be done in the future. For example, I will not share this with anyone. I can't prove that at the time of access. It can't be done. And so obligations are usually where we see privacy living, because we care a lot about purpose in privacy. Why do you want the access? What are you going to do with it? These are privacy concerns, but they can't be proven at the time of access. And this makes them much harder to manage from a security perspective, because a lot of our stuff's sitting on top of proofs and statements. So I'm going to spend the next sequence here on people. So in order to understand the problem of privacy, you kind of have to understand how people normally manage privacy. And then we'll shift out of that into how computers are managing privacy. And you start understanding why the whole thing falls to pieces, because they do it differently. So we're going to cover three. Again, we could do a whole class on this. Boundary management, signaling, and context collapse. Human boundary management. We are constantly managing our image, the way we look. That may be the way we dress. Like I tried to look professorial vaguely this morning. That may be kind of just, if I go to a rock concert, I dress differently than if I go here. If I'm hanging out on vacation, again, I might look very different. I'm doing a lot of stuff to kind of manage the edge of my boundary. Maybe I actually want to talk to random people when I'm traveling through Spain. And maybe I don't want to do that on my daily commute. I change my behavior because life is a stage and we are constantly performing upon it. And so we are always managing the boundary between us and other people. And it is a fluid boundary. We do this for a lot of reasons. We're talking about privacy. So maybe I do it to hide something. But I also do it because I want to show respect. Like one of the reasons I'm dressed in a reasonable manner is because I respect the fact that I am a teacher or respect you as a class. Sometimes I do it because I want to manage information flow. Maybe I want to walk into a used car dealership looking like a redneck with like holes in my jeans because I don't want the used car dealership to know I have a lot of money. So maybe I am trying to control the information. Maybe I want to demonstrate I'm part of a group. You walk into a Comic-Con dressed the way I'm right now, you're not going to get respect. No, you need to dress in with like the appropriate t-shirt. There's a lot of stuff that's done where we're communicating with each other about who we are and how to approach us, how to interact with us, and what we're telling other people about ourselves. And this isn't necessarily hiding. This is a lot about just what do you want to give someone else, curating almost. And one of the ways we do this is something called signaling. So I've mentioned signaling several times here. This is things like body position, right? I went and took a small class on giving presentations, and they talked a lot where my feet are, the thing I mess up all the time, which you're not supposed to talk while walking. I do this all the time. To think about your physical positioning. And I use my hands all the time. They kept telling me to stop doing that. Clothing choices, tone of voice. See this cat right here? What is this cat saying? It doesn't even speak English. And yet it has made quite a statement. This is my chair. Nobody messed with this chair, right? Didn't even need. This group up in the top, they're having a meeting. How do you know that? They formed a circle. They are doing signaling. There's a lot of things we say without saying it. And this is all information that is, again, being presented and is used to do access control. You wouldn't just walk up to that group of doctors, would you? You'd think, oh, they're busy. They're sending a signal that says, I am in a group meeting right now. Maybe if it's important, you walk up, but you wouldn't walk up just to say hi. You'd be interrupting. You don't move that cat unless that cat, you're willing to possibly be scratched. All of these things. So I ran a short study on this. I'm going to go through this really, really quickly, but I want to move this space into digital because we've been talking very much physical. I remember once walking into my classroom, and normally I see this from my students. Like they all have their cell phones out in a vertical fashion, right, up and down. I walk in, and suddenly every single student is holding their phone sideways. What the heck happened? And you ask them, and what has just happened is Facebook Messenger has just introduced a feature called Seen By. That means that if you open the message, they can tell you opened the message. But if you turn your phone sideways, that little notification on the home screen is a lot longer. So now all my students, instead of reading their Facebook messages, are staying on the lock screen, turning their screen sideways, trying to decide whether or not they want to send the signal of that they have read this message. Privacy and signaling. This happens a lot. I've seen whole discussions from psychologists on the damage of Seen By. There's a whole research paper on this. And this is in a lot of social media stuff. It often tells you whether or not the other person has seen something. This is a privacy issue, isn't it? Because it's a signaling mechanism. It's saying, oh, I have seen it. And once you've seen it, there's a lot of context that comes back. Why was this put in? Well, we didn't always have great connectivity, and sometimes you really don't have great connectivity, so you need to know whether or not someone has actually gotten the message and whether or not they've seen the message. which means it's not just seen by. In WhatsApp, it'll catalog you. It'll tell you whether or not your phone has actually gotten this message yet already. And so now are you purposely ignoring the message? Or have you like turned your phone sideways and then decided to ignore the message? There's this whole back and forth people have around this. And it has a lot of impact. When we ran this as a study I think this is Facebook Messenger, we found that 68.4% avoided viewing a message because of the seen by feature. They were reading them before, and now they're not reading them, even though we put a technical thing in that was supposed to make communication smoother. And all of you are laughing because you're probably on one of these boxes. My point, though, is that this is an example of privacy smashing into the system. A lot of people don't understand necessarily how the access controls around this work. Some groups let you control it, so like LinkedIn will let you change the seen by feature. Some will not. Some people don't understand how it functions, and people are putting a whole lot of emphasis on this. What would happen is you're assuming like this little teeny tiny signal is now being blown up into this huge thing, like they're ignoring me. Signal, and it does happen through computers. I'm also making fun of emoji up here. According to Carnegie Mellon, emoji were invented at Carnegie Mellon after a flame war, in which someone made a sarcastic remark that other people did not see as sarcastic, and this resulted in a massive flame war, at which point someone suggested that maybe we should be using smiley face after sarcastic remarks to make it clear that it is a sarcastic remark. Because the truth is that when I am communicating live with you, we have a huge bandwidth. I can see your eyebrows move and your mouth and that you're sleeping and all of this stuff that helps me interpret this conversation. When you do it over a digital format, what do I have? The sentence. That's it. If you want a personal experiment, try talking to people instead of sending them text messages for at least a day. You'll hit the end of your day and just collapse. It'll be so exhausting because it is more effort to go and look at another person and interpret this rich communication stream than it is to look at this tiny thing. But your brain expects that rich communication stream. So when it gets that singular binary signal, seen by, it blows it up into a whole context of understanding. And there's a lot of ways we manage this. I'm making fun of seen by, but we see people switch languages in mid-sentence. Like they'll start one sentence and then they'll switch languages. Facebook has so many privacy policy settings. I have so many. I've seen so many of them studied. What do people do? They drop a book reference instead. They could have made this post only visible to 3 people. And instead, they drop a book reference they know only 3 people have seen. Because they're doing a very fine-grained boundary management. They're not, it's sometimes just very unnatural to go change the settings. All right. Boundary management, signaling, context collapse. Context collapse is definitely what the social media has done. So how careful do you need to be when you're doing stuff? And I say this especially in this generation. So in this generation, saying the wrong thing can be very damaging in that people expect you to understand one thing or another. So sometimes you have to be very careful and careful with your language. And that care is terrible for privacy, right? It doesn't give you that space, that flexibility. And so you think about these two contexts. In the cabin situation with no internet, I can go step on my front porch and scream like my boss is an idiot and feel okay and safe and like I can express myself. If I did that on the subway car, it might go viral. Your physical space has a big impact on your kind of safety of expression, how much you need to control, and who you're presenting yourself to. Compare that to this. Where am I standing in this? This is LinkedIn, because Facebook wouldn't let me log in this morning. But if I were to post on this, where am I sitting? Am I standing on the subway car? Am I standing in that cabin? Like, where am I actually standing? Because the subway car is probably filled with strangers. And maybe I'm equally capable of screaming something stupid. Understanding your space is vital to signaling, and it is vital to boundary management. And this gets us to context collapse. Context collapse is what happens when we were in this one situation, and this other situation smashes into the side of it. You're happily at work and your grandma shows up. And that thing that was not embarrassing 2 minutes ago is now massively embarrassing. You join that great social network everyone's using. We can be ourselves here, our generation only. And your mom joins. And up till that moment, sharing something with all your friends was totally fine. And now your mom wants to be one of your friends, which is a signal if you say no. Because if you say, no, mom, you can't be friends with me, that causes a whole issue. And now all those access control settings you hadn't bothered to set up become a very serious problem. This is context collapse. And it happens a lot in digital spaces. It happens in digital spaces because we used to manage things physically. You see this campfire? We really know who's here. These people are here. Other people are not here. If I go post to my friends, maybe I do know who my curated friends are. Do I know who my friends are 3 years from now? A lot of access control, just mostly because it's easier to do by the companies, is based on your current settings, not the setting at the time of posting. So if I post something and then 3 years later I accept someone as my friend, they can see all my past posts. Context collapse. In which these different groups all appear at the same time. So this can happen in a lot of ways. So maybe teacher turns out to be in your church group, right? You were in this one setting and now you're in a very different setting. Radio is a very earlier example. We were very upset because now suddenly someone can just say whatever they want inside your house. I know this group is like, whatever you're talking about. But at the time, this is a massive problem. Who gets the right to just say whatever they feel like in the middle of your home? And data is copied between contexts. Photographs are partially so problematic because they move contexts. You were in this context, and now it's another one. This is an example from last year. This is the Coldplay concert Embrace situation. This couple is in a very public location, right? They're in a stadium. There is somebody who goes and literally pans across the audience with a big camera and displays it on a big screen, and this is not a secret to anyone. And so they saw this group, they thought they were kind of cute, so they scrolled over, they put it on a big screen. The group panicked and jumped apart, which immediately caused everyone to go, there's something fun here. This is an illicit affair. This ended up with a CEO having to resign. Keeping in mind, this person is in a public space, fully aware of a big camera spanning across, and yet they felt like they had privacy. Because this was one context. And it wasn't the same as their work context. This person would probably have never invited that person to do this behavior at work. Context collapse. And this is a big problem we have with technology and privacy. And now we are back to our point we were initially. So do we need to think about this, or do we just want to move to a pairing? We kind of did a bit of a thinking. All right, let's just start with pair. Think about a software-mediated interaction you've had recently. You probably thought of one earlier. You can change it if you feel like it. Consider these things I've talked about, the definition, boundary matching, signaling, and context collapse. Why is this situation uncomfortable to you? So try to explain what makes the situation uncomfortable using this terminology. Go ahead and talk to your neighbor. 3 minutes. I had another example of this that might work. I cut it out for time, but let's see if I can throw it back in briefly. This is an old example. This is from 2008. This is a teaching student. They posted this on MySpace, 2008. This photo, titled "Drunken Pirate," and they were denied a degree because they were considered unprofessional, not sufficiently professional to be given a degree in teaching. This is a beautiful example of context collapse, as is the Coldplay example. The user is doing something in a space that they considered private, and now it suddenly is moved into a different space. She would probably have never done this in front of a classroom of students. But the fact that she did it private in her own home and took a photo of it, two worlds clashed together and the bad thing happened. This happens a lot, but that's context collapse. All right. We will see how far we can get. Okay. What I was just describing is how humans do this. Now I'm going to give you a short tour through history, because I do a lot of history lessons in this class on how did we get here. This is around e-commerce and privacy. So this is kind of the story of privacy policies, which do not look at all like what I just showed you. And it's also very US-centric. I will bring Canada in several places, but the US was dominating this space for a long time. So we're moving back to the early 2000s. We just invented this internet thing. It was going great. I remember a whole newspaper article from the time in which someone was sending someone else an email arguing about whether or not email was better than letters, and the other person was responding in letters, which of course took like several days to get back. And it was, this is the context of our space. And we want to make money off this internet thing. We just removed it from the military. It's now a case that civilians can use this thing. Cool kids are posting on bulletin boards on each other's computers. But the dot-com boom is about to happen. We want to make money. So the early groups all said customers, 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 and threw up websites that honestly I can't even give you as examples because they're that bad security-wise. You would break them in 2 seconds. And they found this was a mistake because the humans didn't trust them. They get this website and they couldn't tell the difference between a good website and a bad website and a totally bogus website, because we didn't cover this in the other one, but phishing and scams were totally alive and well at the time. And so they realized that business conducted at a distance doesn't quite work the same as business conducted in person. So if I walk into a shop and I pick up an item and I give them money and then I walk out with the item, if I pick up an item, I give them money, they take the item back, I call the policeman, and we've sorted this issue out. What do I do on the internet? Because keep in mind, most of this stuff was shipped to you in 4 to 6 weeks. So you buy something and 4 to 6 weeks later, the object might show up. And that meant that they had to rely on the images and promises, and if they don't trust the company presenting those images and promises, they will show up elsewhere. This means it's very hard for small businesses to come to existence. It's a big problem. So how do we get people to feel safe about spending money online? And by safety here, I do not mean that someone's going to steal your credit card number. That's a modern problem. I mean, is the product even going to show up? Is it going to look like the thing that was online? And so we find that inexperienced shoppers tend to do what's called trust transfer. So this thing here kind of worked, so I assume this other thing that looks like this is going to work too. This happens a lot. So one of the first ideas is let's create this thing called the trustee seal, and then also the hacker tested seal. I think there was a research study at the time that concluded it was more likely the website was fraudulent if it had either of these 2 seals on it. Shock. It's totally possible to copy and paste an image. It's really hard to build trust on a singular site. You might do things like add customer testimonials. You've probably seen all these situations where this web page pop up, this testimonials at the bottom, and you're like, who wrote these? Are these real customers? Or is this a totally fake Angie? Okay, they had that problem back then. And how do you build this consumer trust? So the answer they came up with is privacy policies. And you might think to yourself, this sounds insane, but let me walk you through it. The Federal Trade Commission in the United States, and I looked this up for Canada, we do not have an equivalent that matches perfectly what I'm describing, so I will come back to Canada later. So we're just focusing on the FTC. The FTC focuses on preventing unfair and deceptive trade acts. So this has nothing to do with technology specifically, but they broadly across all of business kind of find groups that do unfair and deceptive material. Now, if you say, like, this cake has no sugar in it, and they find sugar in it, they have the right to fine you. And this does not matter whether you're online or not online. But that requires you to actually state something. So this is just different things the FTC does. The big one in this space is unfair practices and deceptive practices. So they have a 1917 or 14 level mandate that says unfair and deceptive practices, not okay. So how do we go and translate that to the internet? How do we map this to unfair and deceptive practices? Roughly, the FTC declared that if an organization said it does something in its privacy policy, then it had better be doing that. And if it's not doing what it says it's doing, then this is considered deception, and it can levy a large fine. The second one is what caused privacy policies to roll out across the entire internet. They decided that it was unfair if an organization didn't state its practices. So it's not just the case that if you state practices and you violate your own practices, that's a problem. But if you don't state practices, that's also considered unfair practice, and they will fine you for it.
I'm curious, how did this work internationally? Because even, for example, right now,
we are the U.S. The U.S. is the center of the world.
Yeah.
Like,
I just mean, like, for example, the UK right now is having some pretty draconian measures that they're putting in place, and they tried finding an American company, and the American company's legal response is, we settled this in 1776.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was,
Okay, this is not a law class, so I'm just kind of struggling here. Large companies are usually have a base of operations in different countries, and usually the legal finding and things will happen through those groups. The U.S. treats itself as the center of the world, and this is their view. Also, at the time, they were the center of the world for this. So what happened is they pushed out this regulation, and they made a statement saying that this is how we feel. And then suddenly, overnight, every website develops a privacy policy. Now, in theory, we have something consumers can trust, because that e-seal, anyone can copy it. But the privacy policy that's up there now that states what they're going to do, you know actually that the FTC might fine them for not doing it. So now this is a trusted signal. This is a statement that's intended to be something you can rely on. How many of you have read a privacy policy in full before starting this class? A bit. Now, almost nobody. It's here to protect you guys. Like this. Okay, one. Almost nobody has verified your chat keys, and almost no one's doing this. I'm just saying. But you probably still trust it because you trust other groups are reading it, don't you? You think that journalists maybe are reading this. You think that crazy privacy people are reading this, and you think that if there was something really bad in there, it'd be front page news. And you're not entirely wrong to have that view. This is the other reason privacy policies are the same for everyone. We haven't actually let the companies rewrite the privacy policies per person yet. We will see how that goes. Google Buzz is a textbook example of what happens here. So what happened is in, when did they launch Buzz? Like 2010 sounds about right. But they launched this thing called Google Buzz. If you've never heard of Google Buzz, it died shortly afterwards. This was Google's attempt to actually have a social media site other than a root, which a lot of people don't know about either. But they had this thing called the startup problem. Any of you trying to work on capstone projects, you're aware of this problem of like, how do I get any users to use my system if no one's using my system? So it occurred to them, you know, Gmail's kind of popular. And it has a whole list of contacts on it. So what if I just copied all of your contacts off of Gmail onto the social media network, and then suddenly, social media network pops into place out of nowhere. This is such a brilliant plan. They are in so much trouble for this. So Gmail, as of 2004 to 2010, Gmail stores, processes, and maintains your messages, contact lists, and other data related to your account in order to provide the service to you. At the time, Google Buzz, this is why Google now has one privacy policy. It used to have one privacy policy per service. Google says when you sign up for a particular service that requires registration, we ask you to provide personal information. We use this information in a manner different than that purpose it was collected. We will ask for your consent. Keep in mind, FTC is saying unfair and deceptive practices. So what does it say here versus what they did? When you first launched Gmail, when you tried to go to Gmail, what it would do is it'd pop up this thing here. You were given some options. Sweet, check out Buzz, or nah, go to my inbox. If you click nah, go to my inbox, so when someone might interpret as no, you could still be followed on Buzz. Your profile listed them as a Buzz user, and a link appeared on their user interface, and if they clicked it, they would be auto-enrolled and all their data was copied over. This does not sound like consent. And contacts of users that users interacted with the most were listed on their public profile. All right, let me do a really simple threat model. Let's say okay, I'm gonna go gender stereotypes here a little bit. A woman that is being harassed. Who is who has contacted you the most? Probably the person harassing you. They are now linked to you on social media. Automatically. Even if you hit nah. Yeah, so they got in so much trouble for this. They earned like 10 years worth of privacy monitoring by the US government. This is a classic example. This is one that probably matches a bit closer to you, this group, because you probably aren't designing whole things like this. Facebook has an SDK called App Events. This is predominantly used to kind of do tracking and analytics. It's something you can sign up for free, and you can put it in your app, and you can go and do analytics with it, right? Deep within its privacy policy, it says, please don't send us health data. This is Flow. Flow is something that tracks basically health data. We'll just say health data, close enough. So what did they do when they were sending that health data to Facebook because they wanted to use it as part of the analytics? One of the buttons on the interface is whether or not this is predominantly used by women, whether or not that woman wanted to get pregnant. So when they ticked that box, it sent it to the analytics page so that the developer could do analytics stuff on it. That's sending health data to Facebook. This is a legal case in which this is actually kind of interesting because there's a case here. Do you want to go sue the tiny little company, or do you want to go sue Meta? Meta's going to produce a lot more money. You go sue Meta. This one went back and forth a lot because the case here is that Meta is saying, we didn't ask for it. We don't want the health data. It said in our terms of service, don't send us health data. And the Flow app went and sent us health data, so we ended up with the health data. And drat, now I do not remember how this came out. But this case is being put up here because you think of privacy policies as that thing on that first website you visit. But as developers, if you are using applications, they often have terms of service too. And have you read them? Because there's a whole pile of developers sitting in this audience. And I just asked if you read a privacy policy, and none of you raised one of you raised your hand. And that suggests to me you're using a lot of APIs and libraries for which you have not read the privacy policy. Okay. This is the Office of the Privacy Commissioner in Canada. I tried looking up privacy in Canada and how it's handled, and the short answer is, man, I was lucky in the United States to have someone who studied this for a long time as my supervisor, and that's how I understand how the FTC works. This is handled at many different levels. Ontario, for example, has a whole pile of privacy regulations that are different than BC's. Ontario probably has more and more robust privacy regulations because we're closest thing we have to a Silicon Valley in Canada. And so we have a lot of regulations, we have a lot of problems here in those spaces. The federal one, though, is PIPEDA, I don't know how I'm supposed to say, Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. This is the private sector. So in Canada, we have a privacy law that involves how governments are supposed to operate. And then we have a different privacy law about how the public sector, which is basically non-governments, are allowed to operate. This is something that protects, notably, it makes a point that it protects people and not places. So sometimes we tend to define privacy based on homes. Was this inside your home? Was this outside of your home? Is this inside your phone? Were you in the middle of a field? Were you in the middle of a rock concert? And that is taken into account, but the view here is that you can be in the middle of a rock concert and you have the right to not have someone go and pat you down necessarily without cause. You have the right to not have someone randomly go through your purse without cause. Or if it does happen, you at least have the right to know that's going to happen because bag searches are a thing. But that's stated. Like if you go and get tickets at a large event, it will often state very clearly up front, we will do this. Why? Because it's a privacy invasion. We protect people, not places. The Office of the Commissioner does things like investigation of complaints, auditing public awareness, and advising to Parliament. And then again, this is done again at the provincial level a lot. I tried digging through their cases, and I really like this one, so we're going to go through this one. This one's from 2023, so it's not that old. What happened is someone went to Home Depot. They bought something or other. And it said, would you like us to email you your receipt? And they said, oh, that's so convenient. Yes. And it turns out that if you say yes at Home Depot to emailing your receipt, it signs you up for something called the Facebook offline conversions feature. What on earth is that? So we have to be sympathetic to advertisers here for a moment. It's really hard to tell if your ad's working. And it gets even worse in the world of behavioral advertising where every person sees a different ad. So how do I know that my ad functions? Well, one trick, because if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you want to sell this, you need to tell people not just that they can post it for very little money, but that ad will convert. It'll cause someone to purchase something. So how do I know if an ad has purchased anything? I need a unique identifier. I need a unique identifier at the till that I can match up against the ad. Well, Facebook will helpfully give me a privacy-preserving method in which I go and I give them an email address and a type of product, and they tell me whether or not they have ever sent an ad to that person of this product. And this allows them to do offline conversion measure. They know who saw the product and they know who bought the products afterwards. And they can use this to basically compute whether or not their ads are working. In this case, if you click the email me this, you then have to enter your email, and then Home Depot takes that email, sends it to Facebook so that Facebook can then check whether or not this person has ever gotten an ad for that item and tell the company back again. However, it also states somewhere deep within privacy policies that Meta, aka Facebook, can use this information for its own purposes. So how did Home Depot Plate even come about? Well, what happened is a user was deleting his Facebook profile. And if you've ever tried to properly delete your Facebook profile, it takes forever. You have to go delete each thing or it's like resurrects. Anyway, and they found this line. This isn't theirs. I took a screenshot off of mine. So once I discovered this existed, of course, I dug into the Facebook privacy policy. This is a test drive for a car I once did. I would totally not have said yes to this. So I'm fairly certain this was sent or was deep within some terms of service, barely mentioned. But this is your activity from offline Meta Technologies. When they saw this, they complained to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner investigated, and this particular complaint on this page came about, and they fined Home Depot for doing this because they concluded that even though Facebook says that they do this and Facebook discloses that it's done that, you have absolutely no way to know at the point of sale where you were given the information whether or not this was done. And because of that, you have no knowledge. And without that knowledge, you can't protect yourself. And so they consider this to be against federal privacy regulation in Canada. And all of this is based on something called notice and choice. So notice and choice is used worldwide, honestly, as a concept. Again, I could get onto a lot of other stuff. Basically, there's a list of concepts. This is the overly used one out of that list, and we're focusing on it, but you can pull up larger ones. Here's the idea. The idea is that users have the right to know how their data will be used, the information, and that information should be available. So whenever you try to go and give information to someone, it should be possible to know what's going to happen to that data. Once users are aware, they can make good choices, and interacting with a site or service is a choice. So it's your decision to go to Home Depot. It's your decision to go to the rock concert when it says that your bags will be searched. That is a notice and then a choice. If they didn't tell you your bags might be searched, then maybe we are moving into legal territory here. But if they say that up front, now it is a notice followed by a choice. And then the theory here is that marketing pressures will force companies to have good choice options. That last one is what's falling apart right now. You try to buy a smart TV that doesn't go and do really terrible privacy things. It's almost impossible. The same thing goes with the car. There is no market. And this is causing some changes. But notice is provided via privacy policies for most websites. So when they say notice, they basically mean there's a privacy policy. A lot of times when you set up a login, it makes you tick a box even that says, I have read the privacy policy. Keep in mind, again, how many people raise their hands. Almost nobody. And so organizations have to make this really available to consumers. But I mean, goodness, look at this. I took this off of Betterment's site. This is their login process. In order to go and do this, I have to agree to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 privacy policies. This is insane. This is one organization. This is just their privacy policy. This is Amazon's privacy policy, which is, at the time I took this screenshot, 3,478 words long. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. I have to change the title of this. If you're really curious about this, there's this fascinating paper from 2008, which tried to work out exactly how much money it would cost the U.S. government or the U.S. economy if everyone went and read privacy policies, and the answer is, I think, is up in the billions from 2008. Just the amount of time required to do this. And it's famous that the U.S. Constitution, which, again, few people read, is much shorter than most privacy policies. People don't really read these. But they are a cornerstone of a lot of laws. So the Federal Trade Commission, deceptive practices, a lot of it's differing from reasonable customer expectations, which also means differing from what's in that privacy policy. And GDPR has what they call a purpose limitation. GDPR, I cut out of this for time reasons, but it's the privacy legislation in Europe. And one of the big new things it added is that you can't just collect data, you must collect data with a purpose attached. And purpose limitation states that if you're collecting it for a blatantly obvious purpose for your business, then you don't need to ask consumer consent. And if you're collecting it for a purpose that is not aligned with your business, then you do need consumer consent. And I'm being overly simplistic.
So how does that work then for data aggregates?
Yeah, we are I do not know the answer to that question because it is being played out in courts right now. But yes, it put a huge wrench in that. There's some really fascinating cases on that. I'm mostly putting this slide up to get you to think about how consent works and how consent isn't always done at the front. So you can do consent at all different sorts of points of time, right? You can do it at setup. You can do it what's called just in time. So I think this group is still old enough to remember back when you installed an app and you had to agree to all the permissions at the first installation. And then later, it started being the case that you agreed to a shorter list of permissions. And then later, when you tried to maybe open the camera, it would then ask for permissions. This is a massive win by my community, in which we tried to get people to be able to install the app, get a sense of the app, and then answer questions about the app, as opposed to giving all the information up front. So you can change when things are done. You can change the channel, right? How are you going to giving this notice? Is it a public notice? Is it a notice inside the app? Modality, is it visual? What about an Amazon Echo? Or what about Google, whatever the Google one is at the moment that speaks out loud? What about these voice assistants? Should privacy always be written down? Can it be verbal? What happens about things like haptic? Controls, so is it blocking? Can you block things? Can you decouple data? What kind of things do you have? So there's a lot of ways you can do notice and choice. Okay, I did a good job of cutting down these slides because this will all fit now. Yay! All right. That is my crash course in the law, and I realize that's very short. Normally I cover this across 2 days. All of that is probably well outside this group's normal comfort zone. You're probably not normally working with the law or public regulations. So I like to end it with this thing called the Privacy Little Blue Book. This is usually what I hand to developers on how to handle privacy, especially if you're not dealing with user interfaces. And 90% of it's this slide. So we'll go stare at this slide for a moment. We started by talking about kind of how people interact with each other. But usually as developers, what we're actually working with is system designs. So we're thinking about things like, where do I store the data? What kind of data am I storing? What's the shape of the data? If I lose the data, who do I have to notify? And I don't care what they do about it later, but I just want to know who I'm going to notify. Things like that. And that's what's going on this screen. So these are, 7 or 8 different ways you can control things. So let's start with the easy ones inside the box, which is probably what you're used to. I can minimize data. So we talked about how IP addresses have a structure to them. There's class A, B, C, and D. One of the things that Facebook started doing is that they maintain logs. I don't remember for how long. It's like 6 months, I think, with the full IP address, and then they lob off the lower numbers, and they maintain logs long term with only those higher level numbers. On your phone, you've probably seen this statement: do you want to give fine grain or coarse grain location data? There's nothing stopping you from recording something at the city level as opposed to the precise GPS location. So this first one of minimize, this is about just saying, what data do I actually need? And I just delete the rest of the data, and now I just don't have it. And not having it is an excellent way to not have a privacy policy problem around it. The other thing I can do is separate it. So you've probably done this for other reasons, but maybe I take the user's name and personal details and I put that in the users table. And I take their actions and I go put them in a different table. And maybe a lot of apps need to be able to access those interactions that don't need to know the person's name. So what we'll frequently do is we'll just pull them apart. We'll take, this is the sensitive data, we'll put it someplace where we have more access controls around it, maybe only a specific set of things can access it. And that these are the individual transactions, and maybe a lot of things need to access that. You've probably seen a data breach before in which it says, oh, we lost some huge number of terabytes of data, but we didn't lose credit card details. How did they not lose credit card details while losing piles of data? They separated it. And they put the lower security stuff in a different table. Another good example of separation is log in with Facebook, log in with Google. So let's say I want to go to a website and I say I want to log in with Facebook. It then goes and sends my user information and my password over to Facebook. And then after the login, it sends a unique identifier over to the website. Does the website have your password? We've now separated it across two companies. It's now physically impossible for me to lose your password. I don't have it. It's living over at Facebook. I just have a unique identifier that's probably unique to me that Facebook is not reusing across different groups. It's another example of separation. And this can help manage privacy in several ways. One of them is also just the snooping employee problem. Like your employees have access maybe to that big database and not the other one. You can also abstract data. This is somewhat similar to minimize. Minimize is we kind of shrink it down. But in abstraction, we're pulling it up into a larger classification. Do I need to know that you went to Home Depot, or do I just need to know that you went to a home improvement store? Do I need to know that you shopped at this specific bakery, or do I just care that you went and got groceries? So there's a lot of things where I can go and take this piece of information and then bring it up to a larger category. And by doing that, I get rid of a lot of privacy problems, because if you look at the issue I was describing with signaling usually requires a precise information that someone's judging something off of. It doesn't matter if I went to an exotic cake shop or I went to a local bakery. If both of them are just slammed together into something called bakery, I now don't have as much privacy problems. So I can abstract data. I can also hide data. Hiding data is basically access controls. So I can make sure that only a percentage of my employees can see something. I can make sure that it's not visible externally. Pretty much hide is just I throw a lot of access controls at it, and I think a lot about who needs access to what. So does every engineer in my company need access to the entire database? Or is it the case that some of these columns just really should not be seen by this group? Access controls. Those are kind of the core ones that you see a lot in software engineering to manage privacy. The two at the top are where we start seeing things that look more consumer-facing. So this is going back and forth to the data subject, aka the user. So one of them is informing the user. So this might be my privacy policy. So I tell the user this is what I do. Maybe it's that cookie dialog that pops up and says, I'm tracking you on this page. I'm giving you information. It might be the settings even. Even if I don't change the settings, just telling me that they exist tells me a lot about what's going on, about who can do what kind of controls happen. These are all informing the user. And then the parallel to that is obviously control. So the user's ability is to make a statement back down. So that might be controlling whether or not someone else can see my stuff. It might be the ability to delete and actually delete the thing. That's a whole other fascinating thing with Facebook. But the ability to actually delete, so that I have control as a user, the ability to kind of push down. I have the ability to say, well, baby, you're not allowed to use biometrics on this, or do not automatically suggest to someone my face when they're trying to tag things on Facebook. Make them work for it. There's a lot of things you're going to have the user control and give them that control back. The bottom two have more to do with regulators or journalists. There's the court of public opinion, and then there's the official court, both of which can cause a lot of damage to a company. So the two down here are demonstrate and enforce. Demonstrate means that you're trying to make a statement to the general public, we'll just call them journalists for a moment, or you're trying to make a statement to the government in which you say that you're actually doing all of this in some demonstrable way. A very common example of this is Google's transparency report. So Google got a bit miffed at one point about the number of times police ask them for information to be given. And one of their solutions was to pull a demonstrate. Now if they're asked by a police force for information, they log the information, and then once every 6 months or a year or so, they post this public report in aggregate saying roughly how many types of requests they're getting, what the shapes of those requests are. They're kind of aggregated up and they have the kind of that abstraction to them. But this is one way of Google saying, this is happening. I'm being transparent about how this is happening. And I'm demonstrating that I care about your privacy because some of the report is that this is how many requests we got. This is the number of times we pushed back, and this is the outcome of that pushback. So they're basically saying, we care about your privacy. We're not just giving it your data to law enforcement, we actually run it through lawyers, and this is our demonstration of that. You'll also see things like with board members, for example. Some companies are required to report to the board. They'll post those things publicly sometimes. Again, they're trying to demonstrate this is what we do inside this company. Enforce means what happens if it doesn't. So by enforce here, I don't necessarily mean the police. There's a lot of other enforcement agencies that can exist. Some of it's just how them posting their policies and how they manage things themselves. Let's go back to Google here for a moment. Google has a very public statement about what they want, what they consider acceptable from police and what they don't, and how they will enforce their own rules. Twitter/X is continuously in the news for this mess of, this thing was taken down. Why was it taken down? What are your official policies about what is and is not allowed to go up, and how do you enforce them? And so the public is always debating, well, is this being enforced, in a lopsided way, or is this enforced directly? So you'll see a lot of things about companies stating how they enforce it themselves. Facebook famously spun up, I forgot the name of it. They have a small board you can actually put appeals to. They're fairly famous people, and if you post an issue and say, okay, I think Facebook was unfair to me in this way, it will actually go up to the board sometimes, and the board will give an official opinion, publicly stated, back to Facebook on how they feel like Facebook should handle this. This came about after the whole issue in the US where Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, and then Trump posted something on social media, and then Facebook, I think, temporarily banned Trump, and there was a whole backlash about this, and so they spun off this other group that's supposed to give them official opinions about how very touchy cases like this should be handled. That's another example of enforcement, where they actually have an official third party that's coming in to do some of this. All right, do I have stuff? Yeah, I had to think share off of this, but we do not have time for that.
You have 6 minutes.
We have 6 minutes, but when I did this last year, I concluded that no one ever put anyone in charge of anything important to co-op. Or at least I tried to do this one. Think about a software project you'd worked on as part of a university or a co-op program. And mostly I just got blank faces from everyone. I did not realize how little, because I don't know. I was put in some of those roles as a co-op student, but I'm also older and went to weird places. So this is actually most of the content I have today. Does anyone have any questions? Because we have 5 minutes left. And if not, I'll just end here, and then we'll start in on case studies. Nope. All right. All right. See you guys on Friday. Do not forget that next week we're meeting on Tuesday and not Monday as per official university schedule. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a review, actually, but you would have to show up.